Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sherlock Holmes. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment, letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1, the story of today unfolded in Singapore. In 2016, we all know that Singapore, though small, is incredibly beautiful and impeccably clean. In the heart of Singapore lies a place known as Gardens by the Bay, a natural park spanning 250 acres. It's a paradise for nature. Enthusiasts and garden lovers here, you can see 18 super trees reaching up to 50 meters in height. Since opening to the public in 2012, it has garnered numerous awards. However, in July 2016, an unusual incident occurred right in this garden. A female engineer from Tengan, China, went missing. Here, her name was Ku Ea, 31-year-old who graduated from Tengan University and then earned a master's degree from the University of Southampton in the United Kingdom. At the time of her disappearance, Kua was working at the semiconductor company MediaTek. She was a senior engineer who had been working in Singapore since 2012. By 2015, Kua had been granted permanent residency in the country. She was known for her diligent work ethic, never taking time off and often working late into the night. According to her colleagues, the last time they saw KU was on the evening of July 11th that day. She worked until 9:15 p.m. When QI did not show up for work on July 12th and was unreachable, her colleagues became concerned. They decided to call her parents to check on her. Her parents mentioned that KUE had called them the previous evening. This reassured her colleagues somewhat, and they did not immediately start searching for her. QI's father is a bank employee and her mother is a retired government official. The elderly couple, having seen their daughter succeed in her career, were not overly worried at the time. They were on vacation in Xinjiang. Additionally, Kuiji was known to be a very filial daughter. She often returned to China several times a year, usually taking 8 to 10 days off to spend time with her parents. She had just finished a vacation at the end of the previous month, marking her second trip back home that year before leaving. She had promised her parents that she would return in October. Her mother had been advising her to come back to China to further her career and marry soon, especially now that Kui was over 30 years old. However, Kui said, hearing this, her parents didn't press further when Kuiji went to university. Her parents agreed not to interfere with her marriage because KUE had been independent since childhood. She always thought things through carefully and executed them well, as evidenced by her rapid career advancement after 4 years of working in Singapore. KU expressed a desire to bring her parents to live with her. However, her mother didn't like the climate in Singapore, so they never visited. The family members were usually busy with their own affairs, so they only spoke occasionally. Kuiji didn't share much, and her parents didn't ask too many questions when they learned that KUA was missing. They were very worried, but being over 3,000 kilometers away, they could only ask her colleagues to help search for her first after 3 days with no sign of Kuai. Her colleagues filed a missing person report with the police on July 14th. On July 15th, the police issued a press release confirming that KUE had been missing for several days and detailing the last time and place she was seen. The police have been actively investigating her disappearance, speaking with those closest to her, including colleagues and her landlord. Both parties mentioned hearing an argument involving KU. A colleague recalled that around 3 p.m. on July 11th, they overheard Kuiji arguing on the phone with someone mentioning the words money. And my mother, the landlord, remembered that on the morning of July 12th, Kuiji left the house while arguing on the phone with someone, and that she left earlier than usual around 6 a.m. The company's work hours started 8:30 a.m., and her home was only 2 subway stops away from her workplace. The commute should not have taken more than 20 minutes. But that day, Kwa boarded the subway at 6:56 a.m. By a little after 7 a.m., she had exited the train at the North Station near her company. However, according to the surveillance system, KU did not appear at her usual time. After several hours of searching and reviewing footage, the police eventually found her at the exit of the Isan subway station on a different line. She appeared to be waiting for someone less than 10 minutes later. A black BMW pulled up and Queegee got into the passenger seat and drove away on July 19th, a week after Queegee went missing. The police traced the car's license plate and contacted the owner, Cho Gu, also of Chinese descent. Cho Gu, a 48-year-old married man, works at a laundry shop. The car was registered under his wife's name. Cho Gu and Queegee were friends, and indeed they met on that day. According to Cho Gu, Queegee got out of the car at the parking lot of Gardens by the Bay. The police investigation revealed that earlier in the year, Kui had invested in the laundry shop. However, she had recently become dissatisfied with the partnership and wanted to withdraw her investment on July 10th. She withdrew half of her initial investment 2 days later. Queegee urgently demanded the rest of her money. Hence, she arranged to meet with Chio Gu to discuss the matter during the meeting in the car KU. Wai unexpectedly changed her mind and no longer wanted to meet with the shop owner. She also accused Gu of not supporting her. The conversation became increasingly heated and the two exchanged harsh words, unable to bear it. Gu forced Queegee out of the car and drove away. Chu's account matched the details provided by Quee's colleagues and landlord about her phone arguments. Naturally, the police did not solely rely on Chu's story. Let him take the police to the parking lot for inspection. Here the problem was discovered. Although the black BMW did stop at the G by the Bay parking lot for 22 minutes, police surveillance showed no sign of Queegee in the car when it entered or left the lot. It was cleared Gu was hiding something. The police immediately arrested him at the scene and confiscated the BMW. The car, now evidence in the case, was handed over to the Forensic Science Division for examination based on the national judicial system. Cho Gu had a criminal record, having been convicted of fraud in 2004 and 2011, serving a total of 22 months in prison. Forensic examination of the car revealed Kui's fingerprints on the window and her blood on the passenger seat. Gu eventually broke down and confessed that he had done something foolish in a fit of rage. However, when asked about Kui's whereabouts, he suddenly fell silent and refused to answer. After a few hours, Cho Gu requested to see his wife. He apologized to her and begged her to take good care of their son during a video call with his son. He reminded the boy to study hard and follow the rules. After his wife left Cho Gu, CLE told the police, "Come with me on the evening of July 20th. The police followed Cho Gu to Ali 8 Lane Swak Kong Road, hoping to find Queegee. However, they found only a metal shed emitting a strong odor of burnt kerosene. Cho Gu smiled and said, "Kui was here, but there's nothing left now." He then revealed horrifying details to the police. He had burned Kui's body at this location. He split the burning process into 2 areas, one inside the shed and one in the adjacent nook, using kerosene to burn her remains for 3 days and 2 nights. During that time, he periodically returned to add coal and kerosene to the fire. Afterwards, Gu collected Kui's ashes and scattered them in the sea. Upon hearing this, the police immediately cordoned off the area to search for evidence. By the morning of July 21st. More than 20 officers, along with sniffer dogs, focused on the area where Chio Gu had destroyed the evidence. The police conducted a grid search within a 2-kilometer radius, collecting various trace evidence samples. They also drained the water from the ditch next to the shed and dismantled the shed itself. The search concluded at 5:30 p.m. and the police found several bone-like fragments, a clump of hair, a bra clasp, and some burnt fabric remnants. A week later, the Health Sciences Authority determined that the bone-like structures at the scene did not belong to human remains, and the hair sample was too degraded for quick analysis. However, the agency employed the most advanced mitochondrial DNA testing method by comparing Kiyu's hair samples collected from her home. With the hair found at the burn site, the police confirmed that the charred hair belonged to the unfortunate engineer. This marked the first time Singapore used mitochondrial DNA sequencing for identification. Additionally, the police identified the brand and style of the floral dress Ku wore before her death. It matched the fabric remnants found at the scene. Chu Gu admitted that it was the dress Queegee was wearing when she was killed on July 25th. Chu Gu confessed the entire crime to the police. He said Kuiji scolded me as soon as she got into the car and threatened to cause trouble at my workplace. Thus, Chugu turned onto a secluded road. At the end of the road was a roundabout, and after circling it, he stopped the car by the roadside. Initially, he only intended to have a serious conversation with Kui. However, the victim lost her temper and began berating him even more harshly, even taking off her shoe to hit Chugu. He couldn't get a word in, which made Kuiji shout louder and attack him more fiercely in the confined space. The verbal abuse and yelling tested his patience to its limits. Chugu suddenly snapped. He forcefully pushed Kuiji away and then used his hands to grip her neck tightly. By the time he realized what he was doing, Kuiji had slumped forward and stopped moving. Panicking, Chugu checked her nose and confirmed she had stopped breathing instead of taking her to the hospital. He quickly reclined the passenger seat and placed her body in a hidden position within the car to avoid detection. He then drove to the parking lot of gardens by the bay. Trying to regain his composure, he began thinking about how to dispose of the body, driving aimlessly. He turned repeatedly until he reached an alley 40 kilometers away from the scene. It was a quiet, deserted place with no people or cars around the dense forest. And more importantly, the metal shed at the back of the alley gave Chugu two options: burn or bury. After some thought, he decided that burning was the optimal method. That night, Chugu executed his plan by purchasing charcoal and kerosene to incinerate the victim's body. He repeatedly returned to check on the fire and add more fuel to his makeshift crematorium after recounting his crime. Chugu led the police leads to 3 stores, 2 hotels, and the beach where he scattered Kui's ashes. He claimed that scattering her ashes at sea was his way of letting Kuiji rest in peace. However, the police quickly raised doubts about his confession after reviewing messages on Kui's mobile phone. These messages indicated that their relationship resembled that of a romantic couple. At this point, Kui's family recalled that at the end of June, when she returned home, she mentioned a boyfriend who worked at a laundry shop. He was divorced and had a 12-year-old son. Kuiji expressed discomfort about her boyfriend's ex-wife, always being present when he visited his son. However, she had come to terms with it. Believing that she shouldn't be obsessed with the past and that genuine feelings were what mattered, she sought her parents' advice on the relationship at that time. Her father openly opposed the relationship, and her mother suggested she break up with him. Soon after hearing their advice, Kuiji agreed in front of her parents. Consequently, her parents did not dwell on the matter, as KU had always been a source of reassurance for them, although they did not frequently remind her. Kui always listened when they did. Therefore, they believed this time would be no different when Kui's colleagues first contacted her parents. They did not mention her relationship with her boyfriend. Moreover, Kuiji had not publicly disclosed that she was dating anyone before her death. As a result, very few people knew about the relationship. However, a colleague named Hen discovered it at the end of the previous month when she saw Kuiji and Chiogu holding hands at a movie theater. Only then did her colleague realize they were dating. However, when the police suggested that Chogu was Kui's boyfriend, he vehemently denied it. Chiogu emphasized, "I have a wife and child, so I am just a regular friend of Kuiji." Nothing more. He explained that the reason they went to the movies together was simply to repay Kui's kindness, as she had invested 20,000 Singapore dollars in his laundry shop earlier this year. CH Gu also stressed that their relationship was one-sided, initiated by KU. He claimed that he did not even know her real name when accepting the money, referring to her only as Kitten. Additionally, Cho Gu mentioned that KUE often asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend. He recounted having to take her fishing at night and giving her a necklace and bouquet on her birthday, but he insisted these actions were all Kui's ideas. Whenever she wanted to show off to someone, he would have to appear and play the role of her boyfriend. Naturally, the police found these claims absurd and did not believe him. They presented him with a forensic report showing that Chu's DNA was found on Kiyui's toothbrush in her apartment. Faced with this evidence, Cho Gu could no longer lie. Now we can uncover the truth of the case. Cho Gu, a Chinese Singaporean, was born in 1968 in Singapore. He has been married twice. His first marriage was in 1995, during which Chio Gu worked at a bank. Thanks to his creative and flexible thinking, he climbed to a high managerial position. However, Cho-gu was a gambling addict spending more than 6 hours daily at an underground casino in the Yong area. After dropping his wife off at work by 2001, he had accumulated $300,000 in gambling debt, leading to the end of his first marriage. Shortly after his debts came to light that same year, Cho-gu married his second wife, Yong-ha. She treated Cho-gu with great kindness, accompanying him to underground casinos and forgiving him twice after he physically assaulted her, despite her tolerance. An incident where she questioned Cho-gu about his late return led to him strangling her. Briefly terrified, Yanga quickly requested a personal protection order from the police. Cho-gu then began his own form of revenge. He claimed to be ill and sought treatment from a psychologist diagnosed with acute mental disorder. Cho-yu's manipulations softened Yanggong Ha's heart, leading her to forgive him and lift the protection order. During this period, Chu's condition gradually improved. Their son was born in 2004, and the family hoped for better times ahead. However, Cho-gu soon forged documents at the bank to embezzle money, resulting in a 6-month prison sentence at this point. Looking at their newborn son, Yanggong Ha decided to keep the family together. However, Chu's personality began to change. He became not only a gambling addict, but also a womanizer. Despite being in prison, having a wife, and being broke, he was never short of women around him. According to his own private admissions, there was a time when Cho-gu met with different girlfriends each day for over a month to show off his allure. Cho-gu was simultaneously dating multiple women to scam money from them. When he lost money, gambling his lovers would help him pay off his debts. He developed his own system to satisfy his greed for money and physical desires. Ultimately, the truth couldn't stay hidden forever when Yanga discovered Chu's infidelity and confronted him to propose a divorce. He strangled her again, completely desperate. Yua once more sought a protection order from the police. However, Gu was adept at handling such situations. He attended a marriage counseling course at a church and even posted advertisements on a dating website, eventually being publicly praised as a role model. Young forgave him once again. Nevertheless, Cho-gu couldn't stay restrained for long and continued his infidelities. Eventually, trouble struck in 2011. One of his lovers approached Yanggong Ha to demand money, exposing Chu's fraudulent activities once more. However, Cho-gu could not maintain this facade for long. He grew more confident and began spending money recklessly. Gradually, Cho-gu fell behind on his car payments and monthly expenses. Consequently, he reverted to his fraudulent ways. In 2014, he started flirting with women everywhere, presenting himself as a wealthy single man who owned a laundry shop. He used these lies to deceive multiple women. Cho-gu justified his actions by saying, "I'm schizophrenic. How could I control myself?" From 2014 until his arrest, he dated several girlfriends simultaneously, with Gia being one of them. He would spend time meeting his girlfriends, maintaining multiple relationships in a busy schedule. In October 2014, he began scamming people by selling fake shares of his laundry shop. Cho-gu kan Gyao Showan out of 10,000 Singapore dollars. In 2016, he swindled Karen out of 30,000 Singapore dollars with a similar investment scheme. Earlier that year, he also deceived Gia into investing 20,000 Singapore dollars in the laundry shop. Yang Hong was his last victim, losing 9,000 renminbi. Besides these girlfriends, Cho-gu also scammed a young couple out of 115,000 Singapore dollars. Eventually, these victims started noticing inconsistencies and red flags. These individuals demanded that Cho-gu repay the money, but he had his own way of handling the situation. Typically, Cho-gu would lie. At first, then make promises and finally remain silent for a few days. Eventually, the matter would fade into oblivion. However, there was one exception. Their meeting was quite accidental. In December 2015, Gia was trying to win back her ex-boyfriend. She chased him to his apartment but was rejected, leading to her crying loudly, which attracted the attention of the security guard and Cho-gu, who lived nearby. This incident showed that Kay was also a faithful woman. Cho-gu quickly intervened, telling the guard that Kia was his friend, which led the guard to leave. He then offered to drive Kay home. During the drive, he deliberately mentioned that he was a businessman and currently single. This left a good impression on Kia. Before parting ways, he seized the opportunity and said, "You are a good woman if someone doesn't appreciate you. That's their loss. Would you consider being my girlfriend?" Although Kia did not agree immediately, she felt comforted. She gave Chogu her contact information later. Friends of Chogu warned her not to get involved with a man who would invite a stranger to be his girlfriend, but Kia Jia paid no heed. After a month of action, she accepted Chu's proposal at the beginning of 2016. Chogu then tricked Kia Jia out of 20,000 Singapore dollars under the guise of an investment, after which his attention towards her noticeably waned. His responses to her messages became sporadic, sometimes not seeing her for a week, which made Kia Jia suspicious. She searched Cho Gao's name online and discovered that he was married, which was a real shock for her for Cho. Gu dealing with a suspicious girlfriend had become routine, as he had handled such situations many times through sincere and serious explanations. He convinced Kia Ji that he was spending less time with her because he needed to be with his 12-year-old son, fulfilling his responsibilities as a father. This image of a devoted father was something Chogu had deliberately crafted. Surprisingly, after hearing this, Kwaji was deeply moved and even expressed a desire for them to have a child together. She believed that having a child would allow Chogu to spend more time with her. This desire was confirmed by Q's close friend in May. 2016, Kwaji even underwent a minor surgery to prepare for pregnancy. However, his kindness did not elicit genuine affection from Chogu. The time he spent with her continued to dwindle. On June 11, 2016, Kwaji demanded that Chogu repay her money. He immediately began lying, promising to spend more time with her and saying they would be together one day, each week asking for one last chance. Unsurprisingly, this temporarily resolved the financial crisis on June 30th. The first night Kwaji returned from her vacation, Chogu quickly invited her to see a movie with him. It was at this time that his colleague Jung Han spotted them together on July 7th while browsing Chu's social media profile. Kwaji noticed a female account appearing frequently. She clicked on the profile and was shocked to see a family photo with Chogu as the man in the picture. The owner of this account was Chu's official wife. Yang Gong Ha was the woman in the photo, and the young boy looked very much like their son. After seeing this, Kwaji became furious and left a comment on the photo: "You are divorced. Stay as far away from her as possible." However, after calming down, she began to waver in her thoughts. Reflecting on the past few months, she realized that Chogu had spent very little time with her. If he wasn't working, he was with his son and ex-wife. She started to reconsider Chogu and asked him about the investment she had made at the beginning of the year. At that time, she trusted Chogu, believing that he was divorced, and gave him money to invest in gold. She had borrowed 20,000 Singapore dollars from her parents to give to her boyfriend. But now Chogu wasn't answering her questions. It dawned on Kwaji that she had been deceived by a con artist this time. No matter what he said, she wouldn't listen. She shed her previous mild demeanor and firmly demanded that Chogu repay her. Meanwhile, Chogu was also facing trouble with his wife Yang Gong. Ha began to suspect who Kwaji was and whether her husband was cheating again. This situation made him very anxious and stressed he was still in debt, and the family's BMW was 2 months behind on payments. Unsure of what to do, he decided to try borrowing money from his other girlfriends. Chogu contacted one of his girlfriends who had returned to China, and Zhang Hong quickly transferred money to him, but it was only 50,000 RMB, equivalent to just over 9,000 Singapore dollars, still half of what he needed. The 3 remaining girlfriends all refused, feeling utterly desperate. Chogu even sent a message to an ex-girlfriend he had broken up with a year earlier but received no response. On July 10th, Kui continued to pressure Chogu, and a colleague overheard their loud phone conversation, which lasted 25 minutes by July 11th. Part of the money Chogu owed Kwaji was still unpaid. She worried that her money would vanish early the next morning at 5:38 a.m. Kwaji informed Chogu that she would visit the laundry shop where he worked to see him. She made 7 calls, but no one answered when Chugu finally responded around 6 a.m. Kwaji, unable to contain her anger, said, "I will go to your boss and the whole world will know that you are a blatant scammer." Chugu realized the gravity of the situation and understood that he could not let his boss find out about his scams at the laundry shop. He immediately contacted Kwaji and arranged to meet her at the nearest subway station to the laundry shop at 8:08 a.m. Chugu picked up Kwaji as planned and tried to persuade her not to meet his boss. However, Kwaji was no longer willing to listen to his lies. Finally, Chu came up with a plan. He turned into a narrow alley pretending that the car had broken down. He stopped the car and didn't restart it, but Kui was not deterred. She continued to berate and hit him. Chuggu felt increasingly tense. He pushed Kui forcefully and then used his familiar strangling maneuver. This time he did not stop until she stopped breathing at 8:05 p.m. On July 12th, Chugu went to buy charcoal and kerosene. Surveillance footage clearly recorded his car's license plate by 12:25 a.m. On July 13th, he returned home and deliberately parked the car in a corner with Kwaji still inside at 5:38 a.m. Chugu left his house and went to the deserted alley to set the metal shed on fire. That afternoon, upon checking, Chugu realized that not everything had been burned completely. He bought 6 more bags of charcoal and more kerosene to continue the burning process. As night fell, he managed to incinerate his girlfriend's body thoroughly without being detected. On July 14th, he even received a call from Kuyu's colleague Zhang Heni. He accompanied her to the police station to report Kuyu's disappearance. At this point, he knew that the situation was about to be exposed. Chuggu hurriedly cleaned up the incineration site, disposing of the charcoal bags and kerosene cans. He also dealt with both his and Kuyu's personal belongings. He even took 300 Singapore dollars from the victim's wallet by 9:21 p.m. He drove to a remote rural area and threw away Kuyu's phone and wallet. He also cut up the SIM card and disposed of it afterwards. Yu discarded his clothes in a separate small trash bin on July 15th. To remove the burnt odor from his clothes, he bought vinegar to wash them after completing all these actions. Chugu resumed his work and dating life as if nothing had happened until the police discovered his crimes. This was the second unidentified murder case to occur in Singapore. Besides the crime against Kwaji, the laundry shop owner, Edlin sued Chugu for embezzling 4,000 Singapore dollars from the store. Consequently, Chugu faced 4 fraud charges and 2 charges of misappropriating company funds, with the total amount involved being approximately 889,000 Singapore dollars. Finally, on August 19, 2019, after more than 100 hours of interrogation, over 60 witness testimonies, and more than 200 pieces of evidence, the court sentenced Chugu to life imprisonment. He did not appeal and is currently incarcerated at Changi Prison. That brings us to the end of story. It has given me a valuable lesson about the importance of thoroughly evaluating someone. Before starting a romantic relationship, many of us tend to focus on the euphoric feelings of love, without discerning whether it is genuine or if we are being taken advantage of. Secondly, it teaches us to be more cautious with our money. Conflicts over money, whether with strangers or family members, often lead to losing both the funds and the relationship story. It is unimaginable grief for the parents of a USC student beaten to death. Last week, they just arrived in the USC today. The mother and father of murdered USC grad school student Shan Ranty, devastated 6C Ran, is the only child of the parents. They really use all of their savings to support XI Ran to come to the USC to study. And it's like heaven fall down. The sky fall down on July 24th, 2014. 1 week after the untimely death of Ji Shenran, a graduate student in electrical engineering at the University of Southern California, his parents hurried to the United States upon seeing their son's body. Both parents were overcome with grief, crying uncontrollably and needing support to stand. So, what tragic event befell this promising 24-year-old Chinese student? Why was his life abruptly cut short today? We will delve into the murder case of Ji Shenran, which shocked the Chinese community. The incident took place in Los Angeles, one of the most popular cities among the Chinese in the U.S. Although the crime rate here is 1.15 times higher than the California average and 1.26 times higher than the national average, It doesn't diminish the city's allure with its dreamy Hollywood sunny beaches, stunning landscapes, and abundant job opportunities. Los Angeles remains uniquely attractive, drawing many talents to pursue their dreams here, including our main character, Ji Shenran. Ji Shenran was born on April 20th, 1990 in Hut, Inner Mongolia. He came from an intellectual family. His father, Ji Songa, graduated from Dalan University of Technology and is a postgraduate advisor in the Department of Electronic Information Engineering at Inner Mongolia University of Technology. His mother, Dujanu, is a doctor and currently serves as the head of the department at the affiliated hospital of Inner Mongolia Medical University. Although Ji Shenran was an only child, he was not spoiled. His parents always encouraged him to succeed through hard work and education with his innate intelligence and diligence. Ji Shenran lived up to his family's expectations. In 2009, he was admitted to the prestigious Zhejiang University with outstanding grades. Ji Shenran's undergraduate research project focused on the design and control of a quadcopter system. This project earned him the first-class scholarship for excellent and innovative research. In December 2012, during his third year in 2011, Ji Shenran went to the United States as an exchange student at the University of California. This short-term study abroad experience broadened his horizons and motivated him to pursue further studies in the U.S. after graduation. Upon graduating in 2013, Ji Shenran applied for master's programs and quickly received invitations from 6 American universities. After careful consideration, he chose the renowned University of Southern California, founded in 1880. This private university has produced 10 Nobel laureates and numerous stars in sports, film, and television over the past century. Ji Shenran began his graduate studies in the Department of Electrical Engineering at USC in 2013. After more than a year of studying, he told his family and friends that he increasingly liked it there and had even decided to pursue a PhD after completing his master's degree. However, in the summer of 2014, when Ji Shenran was just 24 years old, he encountered a terrible disaster at 12:40 a.m. on Thursday, July 24, 2014. Ji Shenran and some classmates had just finished a group discussion on a topic at the university campus. At this point, the students began walking home as they all lived near the campus just a few minutes away. Since there was a female student in the group, Ji Shenran offered to walk her home. Let's look at the map. The University of Southern California is located here. The female student lived on West 30th Street next to the university. Ji Shenran's apartment was right next door at 1246 to 1247. West 29th Street, it was an apartment called City Park. Ji Shenran lived on the 4th floor with 3 roommates. After safely walking the female student home, Ji Shenran began heading towards his own apartment. It was 12:45 a.m. A few hours later, at around 7 a.m., Ji Shenran's roommate phone Yunyun frantically called the police and reported that his roommate Ji Shenran was lying on the bed in the next room covered in blood. Let's look at the floor plan of this apartment. Ji Shenran's apartment was on the 4th floor, room 408. It was a 2-bedroom 2B apartment. Upon entering the main door, the kitchen and living room were on the left, and Ji Shenran's room was directly opposite the door. When the police arrived at the scene, they found it incredibly gruesome. Near 2 large cardboard boxes in the living room was a large pool of blood in Ji Shenran's room. There were blood stains on the walls, headboard, desk clothes, and shoes. Jinran was lying on the bed, covered in blood with multiple injuries on his body. His head had been severely beaten, and there were no signs of life from questioning the roommate Fong Yunyun. The police learned that the apartment usually housed 4 people, 2 males and 2 females in separate rooms. However, since it was summer break, 1 male and 1 female had returned home currently. Only she and Ji Shenran were staying in the apartment. When asked if anything unusual had happened the previous night, Fong Yian said that everything was normal. Before she went to bed, there were no blood stains. Around 3 a.m., she heard a loud sniffing sound from the next room. She thought Ji Shenran might have caught a cold, so she didn't pay much attention. But when she woke up in the morning, she found blood all over the apartment and ran into Ji Shenran's room, only to find him lying on the bed, no longer breathing. Upon thoroughly examining the scene, the police found that the apartment's doors and windows were intact with no signs of forced entry. Ji Shinran's backpack, wallet, watch and car keys were all untouched. There were also no signs of a struggle inside the apartment, considering the bloodstains extended outside the apartment. Even in the building's elevator, the police theorized that the apartment might not have been the primary crime scene. Ji Shenron could have been injured elsewhere and then returned to the apartment, eventually succumbing to his injuries. Following the blood trail, the police tracked it from Ji Shenron's apartment to near West 29th Street. Here, the bloodstains were significantly more, indicating that Ji Shenron had been attacked and had stopped here for a considerable amount of time. The police split into two groups. One group reviewed nearby security cameras to see if the crime had been recorded, and the other used the media to both publicize the crime and actively seek out witnesses who might have seen what happened upon carefully reviewing the surveillance footage. The police discovered that on that night, as Ji Shin was walking towards his apartment, three individuals suddenly jumped out of a car and started punching and kicking him. The camera footage was too blurry to clearly identify the suspects in an attempt to escape the group. Jinran ran into a nearby alley, however, one of the attackers quickly caught up to him. This individual appeared to be holding a weapon and continued to assault Ji Shenron. Ji Shenron, trying desperately to fend off the attacker, was soon surrounded by the other two assailants faced with three armed individuals. Jinran was unable to defend himself effectively and could only use his arms to shield himself from the blows. Perhaps unable to bear witnessing the horrific scene, the fourth individual, who had been sitting in the car, started the vehicle, preparing to leave the scene. The three attackers, noticing the car starting, ceased their assault on Ji Shenron and quickly got back into the car before driving away. I think it's a big loss for the Chinese community, even though I didn't know the students. Yeah, but no one deserved this. It's really sad to know, this kind of things happen to our people. It's very, very scary. And I'm moving into this complex this coming semester, this fall, this year. So that makes me wonder, is this the right decision, like having something like this happened? Although the media reported that the four suspects were on the run, causing widespread fear and concern in the area, the police had already identified the four suspects shortly after the crime occurred, since the investigation was still ongoing. They did not disclose this information to the public. Fortunately, just a few hours after the crime, the suspects were apprehended. While the security cameras did not capture clear images of the suspects' faces or the license plate, the police managed to track clues from the car by continuously reviewing surveillance footage. They eventually identified the vehicle as a 1993 Honda Accord, tracking the car's movements. After the crime, the police were surprised to find that approximately 2 hours after the assault, at around 3 a.m. on July 24th, the vehicle had arrived at Dockweiler Beach, which is about a 30-minute drive from the University of Southern California. At the beach, the same group robbed a couple, Claudia and Jesus Flores, who were taking a walk. Claudia, terrified, knelt down and handed over the only $40 she had. Her boyfriend Jesus tried to protect her and was hit with a baseball bat by one of the robbers. However, Jesus was quick-witted when he fell. He seized the opportunity to run toward the inland area near the beach, shouting for help as he went. The robbers, realizing what was happening, grabbed their baseball bat and chased after him. Fortunately, before they could get far, Jesus flagged down a police patrol car, sensing the situation turning against them. The suspects scattered. They didn't get far before the police apprehended them. The four suspects were Alejandro Guerrero, 16, Alberto Oa, 17, Andrew Garcia, 18, and the driver, Jonathan Delcamen, 19. In fact, when the assault on Guy's Dan Ron occurred, there were 5 people in the car. However, the police later determined that a 14-year-old girl in the vehicle did not participate in the crime, and they eventually dropped charges against her. Breaking news: police have made multiple arrests in a USC grad student's murder. The 24-year-old from China was attacked while walking home and later was found dead in his apartment near campus. He's an international student from China attending the University of Southern California, working on his master's degree. As he was walking towards his home, he was set upon by a group of individuals. We believe 5, and those 5 individuals accosted him, beat him severely, and in what we believe may have been an attempt to robbery. But the technology that the University of Southern California and the Los Angeles Police Department have invested in this area has gone a long way towards helping us solve this crime one day after the incident at 3 a.m. Beijing time on July 25th. Los Angeles police contacted Jay Shinran's parents in China to inform them of the tragic news hearing. Both parents couldn't believe their ears and thought the police had made a mistake. How could their son have been murdered by 7 a.m.? After contacting the consulate, they finally confirmed the news. Although they immediately applied for an emergency visa, the US online visa system happened to be down at that time. As a result, Ji Shinran's parents couldn't arrive in the US until 6 days after the incident on July 30th. Meanwhile, the court hearing for the 4 suspects had taken place 2 days earlier, causing them to miss the opportunity to see their son's killers on July 31st during a press conference at the funeral home. Jae Songa and Dou Jianu wept uncontrollably and were unable to answer questions from the media 2 years earlier in the case of the murders of Chinese exchange students Ming Chio and In W at the University of Southern California. The sight of grieving parents at the press conference was eerily similar at the press conference. Ji Shinran's parents did not respond to reporters' questions instead. Their relative Lu Lixing spoke on their behalf. Lu Lixing stated Ji Shinran was the only son in the family. We can all imagine the devastation this incident has caused his parents when they received the news. It was as if the sky had fallen for them. Lu Lixing mentioned that Ji Shinran returned home once during Christmas last year, not knowing it would be the last time he saw his parents this summer. His parents hoped he would come home for the break. But Ji Shinran wanted to graduate early and chose to take a summer course. Instead, Gi Shinran was the only child in his family and the only grandson of both sets of grandparents. When they heard the news of his murder, all 4 elderly grandparents were devastated and fell ill. Lu Lixing said the 4 elders are quite old and had to endure such a shock. We are very worried about whether they can handle it. Additionally, he made a strong call to action, improve the security and environment around the University of Southern California, ensure the safety of students' lives, and prevent similar tragedies from happening again. Finally, a year after the incident in 2015, the 4 defendants and their attorneys attended a hearing. Since all 4 pleaded not guilty, the highest sentence the prosecutor could seek was the death penalty, given the severity of the entire case. The prosecutor also decided to try the 2 minors, Alejandra Guerrero, 16, and Alberto Ua, 17. As adults, this was because if tried in juvenile court, these delinquents could be released around the age of 25. In an interview with the media, the attorney representing Ji Shinran's family stated that they hope to punish these young offenders in the harshest way possible. 2 years after the incident in September 2016, Alejandra Guerrero, the only female among the 4 criminals, was the first to stand trial. Throughout the proceedings, she appeared indifferent and showed no remorse for the crime she had committed. Alejandra not only showed no intention of repenting, but she also occasionally laughed out loud at the trial. Her defense attorney argued that at the time of the crime, his client was only 16 years old and therefore too young to be the mastermind behind the crime. The lawyer stated that while his client did chase after the victim, she did not inflict serious harm on Ji Shinran. According to him, it was only after Ji Shinran retaliated that Alejandra acted in self-defense. The defense claimed that it was a justifiable act of self-defense, implying that Ji Shinran was the one to blame. However, the prosecution was not easily fooled, prosecutor. Candy emphasized that the surveillance cameras told the whole story. There was no footage showing Ji Shinran retaliating during the attack. He was merely trying to escape from the group. When Ji Shinran reached West 29th Street, Andrew Garcia was the first to catch up, followed closely by Alejandra Guerrero. At that moment, Guerrero was holding a wrench, a potentially deadly weapon. Not only did the surveillance footage show Guerrero attacking the victim, but the prosecution's forensic expert also found Guerrero's fingerprints, DNA, and traces of the victim on the wrench. After just a few hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found Alejandra Guerrero guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Guerrero appealed the verdict twice, arguing that she was under the influence of drugs at the time of and was only 16 years old. Not of legal age, she requested a retrial and a reduced sentence in 2020. The California Court of Appeal accepted her appeal and recommended a review of her sentence. However, after a retrial in 2021, the judge decided to uphold the original sentence in 2017. The trial of Andrew Garcia, the main perpetrator, began. The police called investigator Matthew, who had interrogated Garcia, to testify. He stated that at the time of the crime, their group had been driving around the university area for several minutes. When they saw the victim walking alone on the street, they saw him as an easy target after getting out of the car. The 17-year-old named Alberto Ua was the first to attack. He swung a baseball bat towards Ji Shinran instinctively. Ji Shinran used his arm to block the blow and refused to hand over his backpack. Ua then punched Ji Shinran in the face, breaking his glasses and causing his nose to bleed. Ji Shinran did not fight back or struggle. He quickly ran away from the scene. Then 18-year-old Andrew Garcia took the baseball bat from Ua and was the first to give chase following him. 16-year-old Alejandra Guerrero grabbed a wrench and hit Ji Shinran. Ua III to pursue retrieved the baseball bat from Garcia and continued to assault Ji Shinran. According to the forensic report, Ji Shinran had clear defensive wounds on his right arm and the back of his hand, indicating he tried to shield himself. His nose was broken. His eyes suffered internal bleeding and he sustained at least 6 severe blows. To the head, these attacks fractured his skull, causing a brain hemorrhage which was the cause of death. His skull was broken into 3 pieces. The fatal blow was not from the wrench, but the baseball bat. However, since both Garcia and Ua had used the bat, it was impossible to determine who delivered the fatal strike faced with 3 armed assailants. Ji Shinran had no chance to fight back during the attack. Meanwhile, 19-year-old Jonathan Del Carmen, who was sitting in the car as the driver, couldn't bear the scene and decided to drive away alone. When the attackers noticed Del Carmen preparing to flee, they stopped assaulting. Ji Shinran got into the car and fled the scene together. Based on the fingerprints on the baseball bat, DNA, blood evidence, and the interrogation video, the jury took only a few hours to unanimously conclude that Garcia was guilty of first-degree murder during the sentencing hearing. Ji Shinran's parents requested the judge to impose the harshest sentence on Garcia. Although Garcia eventually apologized to the victim's family, the judge noted that throughout the trial, Angel Garcia showed no remorse and appeared emotionless. Therefore, the judge did not believe Garcia's apology was sincere. Ultimately, the judge sentenced Angel Garcia to life in prison without the possibility of parole. We're very satisfied with the outcome of the sentencing. Mr. Garcia was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. That's what we were seeking. That is essentially the maximum possible punishment short of the death penalty, which we decided not to pursue in this case, so we're very satisfied with the outcome of this case. For years after the crime occurred in 2019, U's trial began. Over the years, it was evident that the attitude of this arrogant murderer had significantly improved. Like his 2 accomplices, he also received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. As for Jonathan Del Carmen, who served as the driver at the time, although he did not directly participate in the murder and robbery under California's felony murder rule, the criminal responsibility of all 4 suspects in Ji Shinran's case was the same. However, before the trial, Jonathan Del Carmen reached a plea deal with the police. His charge was reduced to second-degree murder in court. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. However, in 2021, Jonathan Del Carmen's attorney filed an appeal because California had recently passed a new law that could significantly reduce his prison time. California Governor Jerry Brown signed Senate Bill 1437 in 2018, which stipulates that only those who directly participate in or exhibit reckless disregard for human life should face felony murder charges on this point. Both the police and the judge agreed with the defense attorney's argument that under the new law, Jonathan Del Carmen's sentence should indeed be reconsidered. Ultimately, the driver's sentence was reduced to 3 years in prison. However, by that time, Jonathan Del Carmen had already served over 7 years, so he was released on the same day. After the incident, the University of Southern California held a memorial service for Ji Shinran. The university's vice president announced the establishment of a scholarship fund named after Ji Shinran, dedicated to supporting graduate students like him. Students attending the memorial service expressed both shock over Shinran's death and growing concerns about campus security. They pointed out that many Chinese students may lack strong safety awareness, contributing to today's tragedy. Additionally, the incident occurred in a student apartment complex that the university had claimed to be one of the safest. Many Chinese students might not use the university's campus cruiser service. Despite the late hours, many students still walk home alone. Therefore, I believe that some of the support and services offered by the university are not being fully utilized by the students. While remembering Ji Shinran, many Chinese students also voiced dissatisfaction with the university's security measures. Just 2 years earlier, in 2012, Woing and Kuming also, students at the University of Southern California were tragically shot dead less than a mile from the campus. Apart from these incidents, the University of Southern California has not been particularly safe in recent years. In 2008, Bron Nellum, an Olympic silver medalist sprinter at USC, was shot and injured at a Halloween party near the campus. That same year, on September 18th, Brian Forrest, a 23-year-old USC film student, was fatally stabbed in an apartment building near the campus. And there have been many other safety-related incidents as well. Investigative data shows that in 2012, the crime rate at the University of Southern California and its surrounding area was more than twice the average. For the entire Los Angeles area specifically, there were 2,771 robberies that year, averaging 7.6 incidents per day. For many years, USC has implemented a series of security measures, such as restricting campus access to outsiders from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., daily installing additional cameras on campus license plate readers and fingerprint scanners in dormitories. However, it is clear that these measures have not significantly improved the security situation around the university. In fact, when Ji Shenren received his admission letter from USC, he was already aware of the Woing and Kuming case that occurred there, but he believed that after such an incident, USC would have improved and strengthened its security measures, making similar events unlikely to happen again. Thus, he ultimately chose USC. Unfortunately, a disaster struck him personally. After the incident, Ji Shinran's father, Ji Sangha, stated that Shinran's grandparents, who are over 80 years old, can only sustain their lives with the help of medication. After this great shock, Shinran's mother is unable to sleep every night and relies on sleeping pills to get any rest. As for Mr. Ji himself, who was previously in good health, his heart has now started experiencing severe issues following this tragedy. Now it is 2024 and 10 years have passed since Ji Shenron's case. Yet the pain and loss remain for his family. We hope that time can ease their sorrow, helping them gradually heal and overcome the grief. So today's story about Ji Shenren and the 4 perpetrators has come to an end. Story 3: on the morning of February 7th, 2013, an Asian woman named Wang was waiting for her friend Novi to join her for coffee and a chat. However, Novi never showed up and her phone was unreachable, which made Ms. Wang very worried, so she decided to go to Novi's house to check on her. When she arrived, she encountered a white man in his early 70s who introduced himself as John Chardon. Novi's husband, J.N., told M. Wang that his wife had left the house that morning, which made M. Wang very suspicious. Even stranger, there were 2 women in their 30s in the house. When asked, John explained that they were his daughters from a previous marriage. While the explanation seemed reasonable, M. Wang still felt uneasy. How could someone who was cheerful and had dinner the previous evening, even making plans to meet for coffee the next day, suddenly leave? Furthermore, Novi had 2 young children in a beauty salon, making her sudden departure very questionable. Thinking quickly, Miss Wang made up an excuse to enter the house and take a look around, having visited several times before she was familiar with the layout of her friend's home. She noticed that the carpet in John and his wife's bedroom was strangely wet and a long rug was missing. John explained that he had just used a carpet cleaner that morning, which accounted for what M. Wang observed. However, she still felt uneasy, so she decided to call the police. When the police arrived, they only found John. His 2 daughters had already left from John's statements. The police learned that his wife Novi was from Indonesia after marrying John, They lived together in Upper CRA north of Gold Coast. John stated that when he woke up at 6 a.m. that morning, he heard his wife mention going out, but being half asleep, he didn't remember where she said she was going. John recounted that during their conversation earlier that day, Novi seemed very out of control. He even hinted that she might have sold her jewelry worth 70,000 Australian dollars to get some cash. He recalled in frustration she should hurry up and bring her foolish head home rather than wandering the streets. But he also said that he was very worried about his wife's safety when asked by the police if he had done anything harmful to his wife. John emphasized that he was a philanthropist who had helped many poor families in the Philippines. He firmly stated that he had no idea where his wife had gone, did not know what had happened to her, and had never done anything to harm her. However, the next day, JN took his and Novi's 2 children aged 7 and N and flew to Indonesia when contacted by the police. John said he had to travel for work and that his plane tickets had been booked in advance and he wouldn't be back for 2 weeks with his wife missing, and the police investigating his decision to travel for business only increased their suspicions about him. However, the police had no grounds to arrest him since they were still unsure whether the missing person was alive or dead. Therefore, the most critical task at that moment was to find Novi. The police reviewed surveillance footage from the surrounding area multiple times. They noted that the night before Novi's disappearance, a camera at a gas station captured her on video. She was driving a dark blue Volvo around 11 p.m. Neighbors still saw her at her home from that point. Until the following morning, no one saw her again. Novi seemed to have vanished. Without a trace, consequently, the police sealed off the house as a crime scene and conducted a thorough search of the entire property. They discovered a urine stain on the bedroom carpet, which was identified as Novi's. Other than that, there were no useful clues, there was no blood, no signs of a crime. Everything in the investigators found Novi's car in the parking lot of a long-distance bus station. However, the station surveillance cameras did not capture any footage of Novi. Her social media accounts had not been updated, and there had been no transactions on her bank cards. Thus, the police speculated that there was a possibility Novi had been murdered currently. The primary suspect remains her husband, John. Therefore, the police began examining the relationship between John and the victim to identify any potential motives for the crime. J.N. Chardon owned 2 factories near the Gold Coast that produced industrial lubricants, along with an investment project in mining and a company he founded with his first wife in 1986, in which he held a 50% stake. J's total assets were estimated to be around 7 million Australian dollars. Before marrying Novi, JN had been divorced 5 times in 2000. John met Novi in Indonesia, born in 1975. Novi was 32 years younger than John. She lived on the island of Java, Indonesia, and had never left the country, although she had always dreamed of seeing the world when they met. John was 57 years old and Novi was 25. At that time, John's assets were valued at 2.2 million Australian, a sum that Novi could never have imagined. John was very fond of Novi. A young and beautiful woman, he began pursuing her passionately. Novi looked at John with admiration, and after less than a month of dating, they registered their marriage, although she was John's 6th wife. Novi didn't mind and even believed she had found true love. After getting married, Novi moved with John to Queensland, where they began a very sweet and happy married life. Novi gave birth to 2 children, turning their world into a happy family of 4. Despite settling in Australia, Novi frequently returned to Indonesia to spend time with her family and friends, to her relatives and friends. She embodied the ideal of a wealthy wife admired by everyone. However, by 2009, conflicts began to emerge between the couple. John started to show signs of being an abusive husband. He frequently beat Novi and even had a mistress from the Philippines. Novi later discovered that John often visited illicit entertainment venues whenever he traveled to the U.S. These issues led to frequent arguments between them after numerous fights. Their feelings for each other were no longer the same. To fill the void of loneliness, Novi also found herself a boyfriend. Both understood that their marriage was no longer faithful, but for the sake of their 2 children, they continued to live under the same roof. About a year before Novi's disappearance, the couple began living separately but still shared the same house. Following their crisis, Novi started to become more independent. She opened a beauty salon in Australia, establishing her own business. This allowed her to support herself. Despite their separation just over 2 months before the incident during Christmas. 2012, JN and Novi had a heated argument. Novi felt she could no longer endure such a life, but feared that John would take their 2 children away. According to the investigation, Novi sought advice from a lawyer. The lawyer informed her that Australian law strongly protects the rights of children and women in the event of a divorce. The wife is entitled to half of the assets. This advice strengthened Novi's resolve to get a divorce, and she finally decided to propose it to John. The day before Novi disappeared, John had just received a letter from Novi's lawyer. The letter stated that Novi wanted 50% of John's assets, which amounted to approximately 3.5 million Australian dollars, and that after the divorce they would share custody and jointly raise their 2 children. That evening, Novi and M. Wong had dinner at a restaurant until 11 p.m. before returning home. After that, Novi mysteriously vanished after Novi's disappearance. The police continued their efforts to find her, but their efforts yielded no results more than 3 years after the incident. The police received information from neighbors. A neighbor named Rachel Y. revealed that 2 years prior, Novi had traveled to the U.S., but before leaving, she told Rachel that if she did not return from the trip, it was likely because John had killed her or hired someone to do so. Novi instructed Rachel to contact the police if she did not return, however, after that trip. Novi never mentioned anything similar to Rachel, again just before Novi went missing. Rachel called her at that time. Novi was picking up her children from school and told Rachel about her impending divorce from Johan over the phone. She calmly stated that everything was over and that the divorce would be finalized that day. The only remaining issue was her business affairs that evening. When John returned home, he drove into his garage at high speed. In doing so, he crashed into the garage door, creating a loud noise that caught the neighbor's attention. Another neighbor reported that he and his girlfriend heard noises that sounded like gunshots that night. However, no other neighbors heard similar sounds. The police then investigated John's factory and interviewed the workers. One worker mentioned that a few months before Novi's disappearance, he stumbled upon a box at the factory labeled with John's name. Out of curiosity, he opened it and found a gun and some bullets inside. Though he did not recognize the type of gun, another worker reported seeing John drive to the factory on the night of the incident. However, the car only stayed for a few minutes before leaving. This raised the question, why did John rush to the factory that night? A different employee recalled receiving a phone call after Novi's disappearance from someone claiming to be John's daughter, asking him to retrieve a box from the house and deliver it to another one of John's daughters. This was the same box his colleague had discovered earlier. These 2 daughters were John's children from a previous marriage and were in their 30s. The same women M. Wong had seen at John's house. When questioned, the elder daughter, 34-year-old Candy, stated that her father John had given her the box and instructed her not to open it. She had never opened it, assuming it contained some important components and items, feeling uneasy. She asked someone to deliver the box to her sister, Angela. Eventually, a friend of Angela's hid the box. The police asked Candy if her father had given her the box on the morning after Novi's disappearance, but Candy denied this. However, she admitted that she and her sister had indeed been at their father's house. The morning after Novi went missing, throughout the investigation, the police believed that if Novi was killed at the house, it would have been very difficult for John at the age of 66 to move the body and clean up the house by himself, unless he had help. So could his 2 daughters have assisted him in 2014? The police discovered that JN and Novi had previously lived in another villa on the Gold Coast, located in the Newton area. This house was quite secluded and had been excavated and repaired multiple times. 1 year after the incident, the investigative team suspected that this location might hold clues, so they brought in digging equipment and excavated 4 meters deep in the yard. They found 2 cars, a white Ford F-100 and a black Nissan Navara. But why did John bury these 2 cars? On March 13, 2014, the Australian police issued a public reward of 250,000 Australian dollars for anyone who could provide valuable clues about Novi's disappearance. This reward led to numerous tip-offs from the public. One witness reported that around 10 a.m. on February 10th, the day before Novi's car was discovered, they saw the car at the bus station. There were some clothes scattered around the car, and an older woman standing nearby looking worried. Across from Novi's car was a white Ford with a short, overweight, bald man and a young woman trying to start the car. The witness mentioned that the scene looked very suspicious, particularly with the clothes scattered around. Subsequently, the police discovered through surveillance footage that the white Ford seen at the bus station that day was one of the two cars unearthed from the villa. So was the bald man. The witness saw John and were the two women his daughters on January 28, 2015. A search team consisting of 50 volunteers conducted a search and excavation near another property of John's in a rural area, covering a total search area of 3.6 hectares, but they found nothing suspicious. By June 17, 2016, after 3 years of investigation, the police had collected 200 witness statements and finally had enough circumstantial evidence to arrest John and charge him with murder. However, moving from an indictment to a conviction was still a long journey. As the investigation continued, people began to uncover the dark side of the seemingly charitable man, revealing him to be a depraved, perverse individual. The police discovered that in the 1990s, John had a criminal record and had been convicted of child sexual abuse. After being detained, John continuously denied killing his wife. The police made a covert arrangement with Peter Ford, one of John's cellmates, to act as an informant, a seasoned con artist and money launderer with over 15 years of experience. Peter agreed to obtain a confession from John in exchange for a reduced sentence. Peter testified in court that on the night of March 31, 2015, John had a mental breakdown in his cell and confessed to him about killing Novi. John said he used the weapon in the mysterious box to kill Novi and dismembered her body after 8 p.m. He took Novi's body to Southport, Queensland, and dumped her into the sea to avoid detection by fishermen. JN even tied weights to Novi's body and punctured her stomach so that the gases wouldn't cause her body to float. He did this because he didn't want Novi to receive half of his assets. John also used ammonia to thoroughly clean the room and carpet to ensure no DNA or forensic evidence was left behind. However, John's lawyer argued that Peter's testimony in court did not match the initial case records, suggesting that he might have lied, although Peter adamantly denied this. His solitary testimony was indeed insufficient to completely convince the jury was there more to this case than met the eye. Just when it seemed the case had hit a dead end, a man from the Philippines agreed to testify. This man named Maso stated that he and John met on a dating app and had been lovers since 1998. John began sponsoring poor families in the Philippines, including funding some impoverished students to attend university. However, John demanded that these students fulfill his sexual desires as a form of repayment. In return, he would provide additional support such as repairing their homes and supplying Ling food. JN told the judge that this wasn't perverse, but just his unique way of loving someone else. In 2011, John met Maso on a dating platform. Early in 2012, they met at a hotel in the Philippines. John asked Maso if he could kill someone. Although Maso was a bit surprised, he tried to stay calm. He asked, "Who do you want to kill?" John replied, "I want to kill my wife," and added that if Maso couldn't do it, he could help find a hitman to kill Novi. He even offered to pay $10,000 to have his wife killed discreetly. Maso then told John he would find a way to hire a hitman, but in reality, Maso didn't know anyone and had no idea where to start. John seemed to believe him and urged Maso to act quickly when Novi went to Thailand for cosmetic surgery. In an email, John described his wife as despicable, cold, selfish, and greedy. He claimed she neglected their children and was having an affair. If they divorced, John couldn't bear to see his wife and her boyfriend become wealthy, and most of all, he didn't want to share his assets. In April 2012, Johan transferred $2,500 to Maso. Maso replied that they just needed to wait until John was present and then they could proceed. At this point, John was convinced that Maso was working for him and had found a hitman, but in reality, Maso was just looking to extort money from him. After discovering Maso's extortion attempt, John still transferred an additional $20,000. By July 2012, JN sent an email stating that due to personal reasons he could no longer send money abroad. After that, their transactions ceased facing Maso's testimony in court. John defended himself by claiming he had asked Maso to find someone because he needed a bodyguard. He argued that he often visited places like Minda, which had many white gangs, and he didn't dare go without protection. As for purchasing weapons, he claimed it was solely for self-defense. Ultimately, after hearing testimony from over 70 witnesses, the jury concluded that before her disappearance, Nova had been threatened by her husband and possibly subjected to emotional and psychological abuse in the relationship. The prosecutor argued that on the night of Novi's disappearance, a fatal act occurred in the bedroom carried out in silence so as not to alarm the two young children. However, due to the lack of direct evidence of the murder on September 9th, 2019, the Queensland Supreme Court could only convict John of manslaughter and sentenced him to 15 years in prison. However, he only served 1 year before dying of heart disease. At that time, John was 73 years old, and Novi, if still alive, would have been 35. Story 4, we will discuss a case that once shocked the Chinese international student community. A 19-year-old female student from China was brutally murdered in the United States. After numerous investigations, the police finally identified the perpetrator, but it was too late. The assailant had already fled back to China, faced with the situation. American law enforcement encountered countless difficulties due to the lack of an extradition treaty between the two countries, and there was no precedent for such a case to bring the perpetrator to justice. An international manhunt was launched, capturing the attention of people worldwide. However, cases like this always present challenges, particularly due to the differences in legal systems between the two nations. How can the criminal be prosecuted? Where should the sentence be carried out? These are questions everyone is eager to know. The uniqueness of the case also caused immense concern among the approximately 300,000 Chinese students in the U.S. at that time. So what was the final outcome for the perpetrator? Let's travel back to the year 2014. The story takes place in the state of Iowa, located in the Midwestern United States, bordered by the Mississippi River to the east and the Missouri River to the west. It is also the only state with borders almost entirely formed by rivers to the east and west. In terms of social conditions, Iowa had a very low crime rate and was once ranked as one of the safest states in the United States. Within the state is a multidisciplinary university, Iowa State University, where the world's first electronic computer was developed. The case we will explore today is closely related to this. University Xiaowang was a 19-year-old Chinese student, beautiful and radiant. She was admitted to Iowa State University in 2012, traveling a long distance from her homeland to study there. Despite living in a foreign country, her sociable and lively nature helped her quickly adapt and become close friends with her roommates and classmates, although her major was chemical engineering, a field she wasn't passionate about. Shad's academic performance was exceptional, with a GPA consistently above 3.75 on the American grading scale. However, such an outstanding student suddenly vanished from the world. On September 5, 2014, Xiao Tong had been living in the U.S. for 3 years. That Friday, she went out with her boyfriend to enjoy the weekend, but after this outing, something inexplicable happened. No one heard from Zayon again on Monday, September 7th. Xiao Tong did not attend classes, nor did she report any reason for her absence. As you may know, she was a diligent student who never missed a class without a valid reason. Some of Shad's roommates began to worry and tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. While they were concerned, one of her roommates received a text message from Shad's boyfriend's phone number. The message read, "Hi. I am still in Iowa, but lost my phone, so I am using a friend's phone. There is an urgent matter at home, and I need to fly back to China immediately. I plan to drive to Minnesota to meet some friends, and will be back in about a week, don't worry." This message somewhat reassured Shad's roommates. However, as time passed, the situation became increasingly strange. After the message purportedly from Xiao Wang was sent, she ceased all communication with her roommates. Her social media accounts also remained inactive, which was out of character for her and caused further concern. Consequently, her roommates attempted to contact Exad's friends in Minnesota, but unfortunately they had not heard from her either before they knew it. It was September 17th, more than 10 days since Xiaotong had disappeared. Deeply worried, her roommates reported the incident to the local police. The authorities immediately launched an investigation since Zeon had mentioned driving to Minnesota. The police decided to investigate the bus stations. However, the investigation did not find any records of her taking a bus. They also searched Shaw's apartment but found no valuable clues. Ultimately, the last known location of Zeon was a small hotel at 1521 South Avenue, Nevada City. The hotel owner stated, "I remember this couple well because they had stayed at my hotel several times." Based on the information provided by the hotel owner, Xiaotong and her boyfriend checked in at 4:30 p.m. on September 5th and stayed in room 218 on September 6th. The hotel owner saw Xiaotong alone in the hallway. They initially planned to check out at 11 a.m. on September. However, strangely, on the morning of September 7th, their car was gone and never reappeared. In other words, they left the hotel abruptly without checking out. As a result, the hotel owner inspected room 218 that afternoon and found that all their belongings were gone. Unfortunately, the hotel's surveillance camera system was broken, so it did not capture footage of the two leaving the hotel. The police also checked nearby surveillance cameras and discovered that before checking into the hotel, Xiaotong and her boyfriend had visited a convenience store at a nearby gas station where they bought some drinks and snacks. During this time, no one was following them. Based on these findings, the police began to suspect that Zad's disappearance was related to her boyfriend, Liang Nan. Firstly, Liang Nan, despite being Zad's boyfriend, did not report her missing to the police. Secondly, Zad's roommates advised the police to investigate Liang thoroughly because he seemed untrustworthy. Finally, after their investigation, the police confirmed that Liang Gan was the last person to see Cao Dong with this information. The police immediately launched an investigation into Liang Nan, born in 1991 in Shanghai, China. Liang Gan later moved with his parents to Wuzhou province. He came from a well-off family and had a good education. Liang Gan also had a decent academic record, and his parents had high expectations for him, planning to send him to the U.S. for further studies. However, Liang Gan faced a common challenge for Chinese international students: the need to improve his English. As a result, he had attended a TFL English training center in Beijing for preparation. It was at this training center that Liang Gan met Cao Dong, born in 1994 in Dalian, China. Shaon was an only child. Her father was a government official and her mother was a homemaker. The family enjoyed a relatively comfortable lifestyle, and Shaon displayed intelligence from a young age, particularly in mathematics. Her dream was to become a biologist during her high school years. Xiaowang participated in many math competitions and achieved excellent results. Initially, she was very confident about the International Mathematical Olympiad because a good ranking could allow her to be admitted to university directly without having to take the college entrance exam. Unfortunately, Xiaotong did not perform well in the competition while her boyfriend excelled and passed. Disappointed, Zeon came up with a bold idea to study abroad in the United States. Although the family was not wealthy, Shade's parents loved her dearly and decided to support her, even using all their savings to send her to study in America. In July 2011, Xiaotong went to an English training center in Beijing to improve her language skills. It was there that she met Li Zhanggan, who was also attending the program. Li Zhanggan was instantly captivated by Xia's beauty and immediately fell for her upon learning that they both had the goal of studying in the United States. He decided to pursue her earnestly. Perhaps Li Shangnan also wanted a companion in a foreign land. Their relationship naturally developed, and they quickly became a couple. Ling Nan even met Shad's parents. Although her parents were not particularly fond of Liang Nan, they did not prevent their daughter from dating him, thinking it would be good for her to have a friend buy her the U.S. in 2012. Xiaowang and Liang Gan went to study in the United States. Though they attended different universities, Xiaowang was admitted to Iowa State University while Liang Gan was accepted at the Rochester Institute of Technology in Minnesota. These schools were over 1,000 kilometers apart, requiring at least a 15-hour drive. It was a significant geographical distance during the first year. Liang Gan occasionally visited Zheodong, But the distance made each visit time a consuming and expensive. Friends of XA revealed that they did not trust the relationship between XA Dong and Liang Nan. There were other guys at school pursuing Sha On and having close relationships with her. Speaking of their lives in the U.S., Le Shangan came from a well-off family and had for commuting, while Xiao Tong had purchased a 1997 Toyota Camry. During her internship, when they went out, they used Sha Tong Toyota. Notably, during the police investigation, it was discovered that on September 3rd, 2 days before Shad's disappearance, Liangan had called her. She unknowingly answered the call, unaware that her conversation was being overheard at that time. She was complaining to her friend about Lin's behavior. She did not know that the entire 30-minute conversation had been overheard by Liang Nan. Upon hearing his girlfriend's complaints, Liangan was furious. He posted a message on social media saying, "My life is worthless." Despite this, they still decided to go out together over the weekend. However, Xiao Tong mysteriously disappeared afterward. Therefore, this incident was undoubtedly related to Liang Nan. The police were preparing to summon Liang Nan to the station for questioning. However, they were unable to contact him. Upon further investigation, the police discovered that Liang Nan had returned to China on September 8th. He had booked a one-way ticket through a former student since there were no direct flights from Iowa, where he was living, to China. Lianan first flew to Chicago and then quickly flew back to Beijing. This only strengthened the police's suspicions. As for Xiao Tong, the police found no information about her leaving the U.S. They believed Le Shangnan was evading justice, although they couldn't apprehend him immediately. The police searched his car and apartment but found no clues. The apartment was in disarray, clearly indicating that the owner had left in a hurry. Without cleaning up naturally during the investigation, the police continued searching for Sha On, but she and her car seemed to have vanished. Without a trace after news of her disappearance became public, Shad's friends at Iowa State University and many other students posted on social media to help find her, but their efforts were in vain. As time passed by the September 26th, it had been exactly 20 days since Shad's disappearance. On that day, a resident reported to the police an unpleasant odor emanating from a parking lot near building number 44 in Iowa. The police arrived at the parking lot and discovered that the odor was coming from a Toyota with the license plate 287JDZ, which was Shaw's missing car. The car had been parked there for several weeks on the driver's seat. They found Shad's broken phone on the back seat. There were documents, including a copy of Liang Nan's flight ticket, in the trunk. They found a large luggage bag, which was the source of the odor. You can probably guess what was inside. Even though the police were mentally prepared, they were still horrified and stepped back when they opened the luggage. Inside, they discovered a female body in an advanced state of decomposition, along with a large bag and a towel. After examination, they confirmed that the body was indeed the missing student and owner of the car. She had died from suffocation and had sustained head injuries from physical impact. Additionally, she was missing 2 teeth. The towel in the car was identified as belonging to the hotel where she and her boyfriend had stayed. At this point, the nature of the case escalated from a missing person to a homicide. However, the suspect Liang Nan had fled to China. As you may know, there is no extradition treaty between China and the United States, so even if he were apprehended in China, Liangan could not be extradited to the U.S. for trial. This international pursuit and prosecution posed significant challenges for the investigation. Nevertheless, the investigation had to continue as the police delved deeper. They discovered that Liang Nan appeared to have premeditated the crime on the afternoon of September 5th at around 4:30 p.m. They went out, and after checking into the hotel that evening, Liangan asked his classmate named Paul to book him a flight back to China. By March 2016, the case was brought to trial at the Wonju People's Court, with investigators from Iowa, USA present during the trial. Liangan confessed to the crime, stating that it was a spontaneous act. He claimed that an argument had erupted between the two and he accidentally injured her. Le Shangan also insisted, "I always deeply loved Zeon Liang Nan's." Family compensated Shaw's family with 2 million yuan, hoping for a more lenient sentence. When asked why he quickly booked a flight back to China, Lianan explained that he was in a bad state of mind and feeling very distressed. He also claimed that he had planned to return to China beforehand and that the purchase of the suitcase was for moving. while the weights were for exercising. However, the prosecution did not accept his explanation. They argued that it was unreasonable for Le Sangan to want to go home to relax without informing his family. First, his claim about moving was also dubious, as he was merely relocating from one building to another within the same residential complex, and he already had a suitcase at home, making the purchase of an additional one. Unnecessary, the claim that he bought the weights for exercise was also questioned, since he did not buy them in pairs, and given his physical condition, the weights were excessively heavy. Additionally, the stores where he bought the weights and the suitcase were located quite far from his apartment, about a 2-hour drive, suggesting he was trying to conceal the purchase of these items. Additionally, Shad's head and facial injuries, along with the loss of 2 teeth, did not align with Lean's claim that he only strangled her with his hands. The prosecutor argued that the crime was not a spontaneous act of passion. Furthermore, from asking friends how long it takes for the police to find a missing person to purchasing a suitcase and weights, and then asking a former student to help book a flight ticket to using the victim's mobile phone to send messages, and finally fleeing to China to hide, all indicated premeditation. These were highly incriminating pieces of evidence against the defendant. As a result, the court found Le Sangan guilty of intentional homicide, considering the severity of the crime's consequences and its negative impact on society. Le Sangan was sentenced to life imprisonment and stripped of his political rights for life. Subsequently, Le Sangan filed an appeal claiming that the American police investigation had errors. The evidence was unreasonable, and he hoped for a reduced sentence. However, after an investigation, the court concluded that the audio and visual evidence provided Ed by the American police under the legal cooperation request was authentic, followed proper procedures, and could substantiate the case's facts. Therefore, the court rejected Liang Nan's appeal and upheld the original sentence. The judge in the case also noted that during sentencing, the court took into consideration Liang Nan's confession and the economic compensation provided to the victim's family. Avoiding the death penalty was already a merciful decision for him. However, in June 2020, after 4 years in prison, Liang received 6 commendations for good behavior, positive rehabilitation, and diligent study while serving his sentence. Consequently, his sentence reduction proposal was approved, and his punishment was reduced to 22 years in prison. With this sentence, he is set to be released in June 2042, by which time Liang Nan will be over 50 years old. Story 5 on Tuesday, April 10th, 2012, 12. As night fell, rain began to pour over the University of Southern California campus. In the cold and dark night, Woing, a 23-year-old student, was still working on experiments with her classmates in the electrical engineering building at midnight. The group decided to head home to get some rest before starting another busy day, according to the plan, at 10:30. The next morning, Woing would welcome a group of international students from China with her enthusiasm for community service. She had volunteered to guide the group on a campus tour, typically when returning home at midnight. Woing and her boyfriend Kuming would ride their bicycles slowly back to their off-campus apartment. Their place was not far from the University of Southern California, only about 1.4 miles, a 10-minute bike ride. However, tonight they couldn't ride their bikes because the rain was getting heavier. Fortunately, her boyfriend Kuming had everything prepared to pick her up. He had also studied in the library until midnight. After meeting Woing around 12:15 a.m., he drove his recently purchased old BMW to take her back to their apartment. The drive wasn't long, and within a few minutes they arrived, since the street near their rented apartment was packed with cars and it was raining heavily. Kuming didn't park far away. He turned on the hazard lights and temporarily parked parallel to other cars. Just as they were saying goodbye in the car and Woing was about to step out, 2 black men in hoodies suddenly appeared on either side of the vehicle. More frighteningly, they were armed and pointed their guns at the couple, ordering them to get out. Before Wang and Kuming could react, gunshots rang out. A bloody massacre ensued. Today's story takes place in Los Angeles, USA, specifically at the University of Southern California. A renowned private university in Los Angeles, the university has highly ranked schools such as cinematic arts, business, public policy, and engineering. The University of Southern California has produced 5 Nobel Prizes winners and many other notable alumni. This is also the private university with the largest number of international students in the United States. Among its over 40,000 students, more than 8,000 are international students with over 3,000 from China, naturally Woing and Kuming. Our main characters were among them. Woing was born in 1988 in Chang'e, Hunan Province, China, and she was an only child. Her mother was a retired employee of the Chang'e Cotton Company, and her father transitioned from the military to become a police officer in 1999, despite not being financially well off. Thanks to her excellent academic performance, when Woing received an acceptance letter for graduate studies from the University of Southern California, her parents borrowed money from relatives and friends to pay for her tuition to study in the U.S. Wu Ying's boyfriend King was from Jin in northeast China and was also an only child. Standing at 6 feet tall, Kuming not only achieved a grade 10 in piano but also practiced taekwondo. However, he had a congenital heart condition since childhood, preventing him from drinking alcohol or engaging in strenuous activities with his outstanding academic record. He was admitted to Beiyang University, Beijing, University of Aeronautics and Astronautics with top scores. Perhaps it was fate that two young people who had never met both received acceptance letters from the University of Southern California. At the end of 2011, they both enrolled in the electrical engineering program and started on the same day. Although destiny brought them together, it wasn't until March 2012, 2 years later, that Woing and Kuming officially transitioned from classmates to a couple. Woing had a wonderful personality. She was always smiling, and no matter how much she was teased, she would just laugh it off and joke back. Being around her always brought joy to others. Woing was very caring towards her friends. She studied diligently, often staying up late to study, and completed assignments. Just last month, she pulled several all-nighters to prepare for exams despite her busy schedule. She still cooked meals for her boyfriend to help nourish him, which deeply touched him. 10 days before the incident on April 1st, Wing told her father online that she would bring a friend home after graduation. This was the first time her family learned that she had a boyfriend then. 3 days before the incident on April 8th, Wing happily informed her family that she would graduate. Next month, she had bought a plane ticket to return home in May and planned to introduce her boyfriend to the family on the other side. On April 2nd, 2012, Qing's parents were also informed by their son that he had a girlfriend. This was Qing's first relationship. His parents were so overjoyed and excited that they couldn't sleep for 3 nights, eagerly anticipating meeting their future daughter-in-law. However, an unexpected tragedy shattered all the happiness of both families in an instant. At 12:55 a.m. on April 11th, 2012, a resident named Giovanni, living near the University of Southern California on Raymond Avenue, called the police to report hearing several gunshots and the sound of breaking glass. Looking out the window, he saw a dark-colored BMW with its hazard lights on, parked in the middle of the street in the rain. The driver's door was open and a man was staggering across the road toward a house opposite. He banged on the door so hard that it broke the glass. Witnessing this, Mrs. Annie, without grabbing an umbrella, called 911 and rushed across the street when she arrived. The man was lying on the ground in front of the house, coughing up blood and pointing toward the car. With his last bit of strength, he told Mrs. Annie there's someone else in the car. When the police arrived at the scene, they found 23-year-old Woing sitting in the passenger seat, leaning forward and no longer breathing. The paramedics discovered she had been shot twice, once in the right arm and once fatally in the chest. Her boyfriend, Q Ming, had managed to run to their rented apartment to seek help, but he lost consciousness before the police arrived. The paramedics found that he had been shot behind his left ear with a bullet lodging in the back of his brain, causing severe brain hemorrhaging, although an ambulance quickly transported both of them to Los Angeles Hospital for emergency treatment. Their injuries were too severe, and they were pronounced dead shortly afterwards, since it was still raining heavily at the time of the incident. Collecting evidence at the scene was extremely challenging. The investigators found that the driver's side window had been shattered with one 9mm bullet lodged in the passenger seat and another bullet embedded in the interior of the passenger door. Additionally, on the street beside the driver's seat, the police discovered 2 spent 9mm shell casings. After a comprehensive analysis, the police concluded that the perpetrator fired the shots from outside the car near the driver's seat. Unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA from the suspect were found at the scene. Moreover, Woing and Ching's cell phones were stolen by the ASENT when questioning the neighbors around the crime scene. The police discovered that none of the households had security cameras installed. One of the neighbors, named Yuri, said he also called 911. After hearing the gunshots, he looked out the second-floor window of his house and saw the BMW parked in the middle of the street. Yuri mentioned that there were two black men standing on either side of the car who exchanged a few loud words before quick leaving the scene. However, both were wearing hooded sweatshirts and the streetlights were dim, so he couldn't clearly see their faces on the evening of Wu In and Ching's death. Students at the University of Southern California held a candlelight vigil on campus. For many, it felt like a nightmare afterward. Several students shared their feelings. I arrived at the hotel around 900 this morning. I was at the bookstore this morning and I heard my colleagues talking about the incident, so I quickly logged onto my phone and saw the crime alert letter. I was actually living in Raymond when I woke up this morning. A friend of mine told me that there had been a gunfight and that 2 people had been injured. I lived in the downtown area for about 27 years. Did you hear anything? That night, the crime scene was only 500 meters away from where I lived. It was raining last night, so the sound was not very clear. There were no streetlights on our side, so it was dark at night. The school didn't guard us either, so no one was in charge last night. There were 557 gunfights from January 1st, 2007 to now. Last night, we were still having fun and chatting with our colleagues, but this Friday, our project is coming to an end. We are still working on it. Yesterday, we were still thinking about what we should do the day after tomorrow. We could do a demo on Friday, but after yesterday, we didn't have any idea what to do the day after tomorrow. I often go to school in the evening. I go to school in the evening and have a good time. I don't go to school in the morning. Morning, I go to school in the evening and study. I don't go to school in the evening and study. 2 days after the incident on April 13th, the Los Angeles Police Department held a press conference at the crime scene under heavy rain. During the conference, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Southern California announced that the school was offering a $125,000 reward for any useful information that could lead to solving the case at the press conference. The Deputy Chief of Police stated that they had not yet determined the gender of the perpetrator and hoped the public could provide more information. However, in reality, as early as April 11th, they had already identified a suspect. While the memorial service was taking place at the University of Southern California, the Los Angeles Police Department was extremely busy. Detective Phillips from the homicide unit received a call from the lab. The forensic expert reported that by comparing the bullets, they had determined that the bullets found at the scene matched those from 2 previous unsolved cases. The first incident occurred on December 3, 2011, when a 20-year-old student was shot at a party in South Los Angeles. The second incident happened on February 12, 2012, at the Galen Center Banquet Hall near Arena 51, close to the University of Southern California. This was a popular local venue for weddings and parties. On that day, the hall was rented for a lavish birthday party with over 100 guests, and the event lasted from the evening until midnight. Toward the end of the party, a 21-year-old named Devance and his friend Zy Flowers were heading toward the exit. As they approached the door, they encountered a group of black individuals who had just arrived at the party, singing and clearly under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Both men and women in the group were in a heightened state of excitement, raising their hands and chanting the gang name 8 Tree. Originally, the gang was called it 3, but over time, the name morphed into 8 Tree due to similar pronunciation as this rowdy group passed by one of them, bumped into Flowers, who was about to leave. When Devon saw his friend being shoved without an apology, he started arguing with the person who had bumped into Flowers. Within seconds, the argument escalated into a physical altercation. Soon the situation spiraled out of control, with not just the 2 of them fighting, but the entire group joining in the birthday party. Quickly turned into a massive brawl. During the chaos, the black man pulled out a gun and fired 2 shots at Devance. One bullet hit his abdomen and the other entered the back of his head and exited through his left eye. Miraculously, Devance retained his vision, but the abdominal wound left him paralyzed from the waist down. Although the police arrived quickly at the scene, the perpetrator had already fled. leaving behind several 90-meter shell casings on the ground 2 months later on April 11th when Wong and Ching were murdered. The police discovered that the shell casings found at the scene matched those from the birthday party shooting. This indicated that the perpetrator was likely the same person, or at least from the same group through thorough investigation of the birthday party. Shooting the police learned that the day after the incident on February 13th, a friend of Devance who was present at the scene told the police that he knew who the shooter was. He had asked around and learned the nickname of the perpetrator after searching online. This friend said, "I found a photo of the suspect on Facebook with this lead." The investigators immediately contacted Dan's friend at 9:30 p.m. On April 11th, this witness arrived at the police station using the station's computer. He identified one of the thugs present at the birthday party as Brian Barnes. One of the main suspects in the case, Barnes was born on May 10, 1992, making him only 20 years old. At the time of the incident, Barnes was not only a notorious thug in the neighborhood, but also a young father with his daughter having been born the same year as the incident. After confirming Barnes's involvement in the case, the police obtained a warrant to search his Facebook account at 3 p.m. on April 12th. Through a detailed investigation of Barnes's Facebook, the police discovered that his most frequent contact was Javier Baldin, born on August 29, 1992. Barnes and Baldin had posted numerous updates together about underground parties and gang-related activities. In one post, Barnes wrote, "No respect, Inc. We are a family. If you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. No respect." Inc. The police investigation revealed that many attendees of these parties were associated with local gangs. However, Barnes and Baldin were not actually members of any gang. They merely used gang affiliations to intimidate others. Given that Wu In and Kum Ming's phones were taken at the scene, the police attempted to track the signals from these devices while Kum Ming's phone remained off and untraceable. Wu Ying's phone signal appeared near Barnes's residence. At this point, the police did not rush to take action, but instead wiretapped Barnes's phone to gather more evidence. Over the next month, the wiretaps provided crucial evidence. Although Barnes did not explicitly mention April 11th in his calls, he used several key phrases directly related to the case. For instance, he told Baldin that he remembered the night they ran up on those two small Asian people, and he intended to gift the phone he stole from the girl to Baldin for his birthday. But since he couldn't unlock it, he sold it to a phone shop for $230 and felt he got a bit shortchanged. Further investigation included interrogating Barnes's ex-girlfriend, who admitted to the police that Barnes had once told her he stole a phone and might have shot two people in the process. Additionally, cell tower evidence showed that in the early hours of April 11th, Barnes and Balin's phone signals were near the crime scene at 12:14 a.m. and 10:02 a.m. Moreover, at 1 a.m., 9 a.m., there was a call to Wu Ying's phone indicating that her phone's location matched Barnes's residence after she had been murdered at 1:36 a.m. Balan's phone signal also appeared at Barnes's location, combining cell tower evidence, the ex-girlfriend's testimony, and the shell casings found at the scene. The police believed that Barnes and Baldin were the prime suspects. Consequently, 1 month after the crime, on May 18th, both were arrested facing police interrogation. Barnes and Baldin denied any wrongdoing. To pressure Balin into confessing, the interrogators mentioned that if the case went to trial, the jury might not believe him, and that he could face the death penalty in California under continuous pressure. Baldin eventually admitted that on the day of the crime, Barnes and his new Terrell went to the University of Southern California. Balin confessed that he and Barnes had robbed an Asian couple in a BMW, and he even drew the position of the BMW at the crime scene. Balan explained that there were 3 of them with Tyrell as the driver, circling the university campus looking for targets to rob after spotting Woing and King's BMW. Barnes and Baldin quietly exited the vehicle with guns, while Tyrell stayed in the car to drive and keep watch. Baldin claimed that he did not fire the gun. Instead, Barnes approached the driver's side with the weapon. They both loudly demanded that the occupants get out of the car. Baldin thought Barnes only intended to rob the car, but before the couple could respond, Barnes suddenly opened fire on them. Initially, they planned to drive off in the BMW, but Baldin mentioned that they saw a neighbor witness the shooting, which made them abandon that plan in a panic. Barnes only managed to grab 2 phones from the car. Ultimately, the two of them rushed back to the nearby parked car and Tyrell drove them quickly away from the scene before being detained awaiting trial. Baldwin bragged to a fellow inmate that he and a friend had robbed two graduate students near the University of Southern California and even shot and killed them. He also mentioned that the incident had made international headlines. What Baldwin didn't know was that this fellow inmate was actually an undercover police officer, and the entire conversation was recorded. However, since Barnes and Baldwin were charged with first-degree murder, their families have been actively campaigning in local black community churches and on Facebook claiming that the police had no evidence to prove their children committed the murders. According to California law, cases involving two victims can result in the death penalty for the perpetrators. Despite this, the case presented several challenges for the police, primarily due to the lack of physical evidence, although the shell casings found at the scene matched those from the birthday party. 2 months earlier, Baldwin claimed that Barnes had disposed of the gun after the crime, and the police had yet to locate the 9mm weapon, while cell tower evidence linked Barnes and Baldwin to the crime scene in Barnes' residence cell. Signal data is not precise enough to pinpoint exact streets or houses. Although a witness saw two black men committing the crime, they couldn't clearly identify their faces. Currently, the only evidence the police can present is the recorded conversation of Baldwin in jail and his confession to the interrogator. The Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services assigned the task of helping him reintegrate into society to a private company called Teens' Happy Home Foster Family Agency. I think the name of this company is quite fitting because after being placed with them, Bowden indeed seemed very happy. Specifically, the government paid Teens' Happy Home Foster Family Agency $1,600 per month. The agency's responsibilities included arranging a foster home for Bowden, monitoring his education and daily life, and providing certain types of support. Later, for convenience, Teens' Happy Home Foster Family Agency arranged for Bowden to live at the home of a female social worker from the company. This was a year before Wu Ying's murder. It seems that after moving in with the social worker, Bowden was given complete freedom, with the social worker providing little to no assistance. In other words, American taxpayers were paying $1,600 a month for Bowden, but this money essentially ended up in the pockets of the agency and the social worker through various means. Ultimately, Bowden received no education supervision or guidance, leading to the tragic harm he caused to Wu Ying and Kuming. As for Barnes, his father had been in prison for a long time online. Barnes revealed that he had never met his biological father in person. The first time he saw him was through a screen in prison after being incarcerated. Barnes lived quite comfortably. Occasionally, he would smoke, sing, and dance to music. In this case, we also need to discuss the role of the American police. If you pay close attention, you may realize that when investigating the birthday party on February 12th, they had an opportunity to catch Barnes and Bowden because the day after the party, a witness informed the police that they had seen the suspect's image on Facebook had they followed up on this lead. At that time, capturing Barnes and Bowden would not have been too difficult. This detail was first uncovered by Catherine Green, a student journalist at the University of Southern California. Later, the Los Angeles Police Department responded to the journalist's inquiry about this issue. The deputy chief in charge of the case at that time stated that if he had handled the birthday party investigation, he might have acted differently. However, the official also added that the police did not entirely abandon the investigation of the February party shooting. Rather, Los Angeles was dealing with a high volume of shootings simultaneously. According to his statistics, in February, his team had to handle over 260 shooting victim cases. Each case required swift action to gather leads, therefore he could understand why the case was set aside. At that time, the workload was overwhelming. These deeply rooted societal issues are the real source of such crimes. The University of Southern California has made significant efforts to enhance security, but these measures are only temporary solutions. The murder of Ji Shinran 2 years later is a testament to this. Additionally, everyone's awareness of safety needs to be heightened. Hardworking students often study until midnight, and during this time they should seek the protection of campus security if possible, even if home is close and they prefer not to inconvenience others. Safety and life are the most important considerations. The ones most heartbroken by Wu Ying and King's deaths are undoubtedly their parents and families. However, many media outlets in China, driven by profit, sensationalize the story with headlines featuring keywords like BMW, a man and a woman, and 1 a.m., deliberately leading readers to imply that the victims were out late partying when the incident occurred, later wooing, and Kum Ming's classmates testified that their lives in America were like those of most people, very challenging. Yet they remained dedicated to their studies. A particularly poignant event occurred on the 9th day after the crime. April 20th, 2012, at the farewell ceremony for Kum Ming and wooing, their parents held a wedding for their deceased children. They exchanged wedding rings for Kum Ming and wooing, who lay in their coffins, hoping the young couple could be together in heaven. This is a tradition that is not uncommon in China, as the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Sherlock Holmes. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe. Stay curious and let the night watch over you, for